It's a historic and progressive step by the Apex Court to uphold Sabka Quota, the NDA Sarkar's 10% reservation for the economically weaker section, irrespective of their caste, class or religion, has been upheld by a 3-2 majority bench of the Supreme Court. The learned bench, in its order, has allowed the breaching of 50% quota cap it had set itself in 1992, calling it an affirmative action by the Parliament in favour of the poor. The court also clarified that 10% economically weaker section quota doesn't violate the principles of the Constitution. However, one of the justices did point out that quotas were envisioned as time-bound and not endless. The Sabka Quota push by the Supreme Court has faced backlash by the vote bank premies meanwhile. The DMK contends that scholarships, not quota, is already being extended to the weaker sections. The Congress party's Udit Raj, in fact, slammed the judgment as an upper caste bias, where the 50% cap was only imposed for SC/STs not economically backward. So these are the reactions that have been coming in. The Congress leader Udit Raj has slammed the Supreme Court. In fact, he also called the top court casteist. Meanwhile, the BJP has welcomed this move and has said that this is a very, very significant move, and this is the Supreme Court's way of vindicating the stand that Prime Minister Modi has taken. This was a 3-2 judgment, 3 judges concurring that there is a need for quota for the economically backward. But let's try to put this in perspective. Let's try to put and get you the details of what exactly happened. So let's put that in perspective on what happened. The majority view was this, that it does not violate the Constitution or Article 14 or 15, which guarantees equal rights for all. So in fact, this was one of the most crucial points that the Supreme Court had to agree on. So it doesn't breach 50% cap that has been fixed by the Supreme Court back in 1992. This was also one of the crucial aspects of the case that was looked out for. Now, the economic criteria and this yardstick is for quota. This is one of the questions that had been raised, whether that can be a yardstick or not. The Supreme Court contending that yes, it can be. This is, remember, the majority view, that it doesn't disturb the quota or for those who are socially backward. Questions had been raised on whether this will wipe away the other quota. How does that stand in perspective of this verdict today? So this is the clarification that had been issued, also saying that it's an affirmative action by the Parliament. So this, in fact, this key point is what the BJP has been saying is a vindication for its Sabka Saath policy for all, for the economically weaker section as well. It can't be called unreasonable classification. One of the arguments in the petitions had been that this would be unreasonable to give this as a reason, economically weaker sections as a reason for quota. So that has also been held by the majority view. Now, the policy of reservation must be time-bound. This is, in fact, one of the crucial aspects that has been discussed and also opens up the door for the other reservations on whether that should also be time-bound or not. So it could, in fact, open up a debate on that front. So the quota is not an end, but is the means to an end. In fact, these were the observations that were made by the judges. This, of course, we're talking about the majority view when we talk about a 3-2 verdict. Don't let it become a means for vested interests. This is also one of the points that had been mentioned by one of the judges, talking about how it could be used for vested interests, but the government must ensure that that does not happen. Now, after 75 years, revisit quota in society. Now, this is very, very interesting statement that has come in from the judge, calling for a review of quota in the society's interest. This means, of course, it opens up the debate on whether the reservations that are currently present, does that open up for the review or not? But these were, of course, the majority views of what the system should be like while upholding the constitutional validity of the quota system. Let's also talk about the minority view, because 2 judges, including Chief Justice UU Lalit, were of the view that this is against the Constitution. So let's talk about what they have said as well. Now, they have said that the Constitution does not permit exclusion. So, you know, this was one of the observations that had been made, also saying that it undermines the fabric of social justice. Questions, remember, have been raised on how economically backward section can be classified, also whether that's temporary, you know, it's not permanent. One of the judges, in fact, had previously also observed that economically weaker is not a permanent stature. as opposed to something like a caste that goes on for generations. Any discrimination goes on for generations. So this was also one of the statements that had been made by the judges. This, of course, was the view that had been made in respect to the minority view that had been made. So these were the observations that were made by the judges. Remember, it was split a 3-2 verdict, but the majority, of course, being in favor of upholding the law. So this has come as a big relief to the centre. Meanwhile, the opposition has also slammed the Modi government. Listen into some reactions.
First of all, I am not against EWS reservation. Secondly, I am not condemned. I have raised the question that the same Supreme Court has been always denying reservation to SC, ST, OBC whenever 50% limit was exceeded. Always citing the example of Indira Sahni case. Right. But in this case, where that stand has gone, that stand is banished, and same Supreme Court says that Constitution does not bar. But earlier, always, they have been rejecting any matter of SC, ST, OBC exceeding the limit of 50% limit of reservation. They had been outrightly rejecting. That is what the mindset I am challenging.
সংবিধানে এসসি এসটিদের জন্য সংরক্ষণের ব্যবস্থা করা হলো। এখন প্রশ্ন হচ্ছে, এত সংরক্ষণ দেওয়ার পরেও আমার তাদের জন্য আমার কাজের সুযোগ কিভাবে আমি তৈরি করব, শিক্ষার সুযোগ কিভাবে তৈরি করব, প্রশ্ন এই জায়গাটায়। সংরক্ষণ ইটসেলফ ইজ নট এ প্যানাসিয়া। যখন ভারতবর্ষে চাকরির বাজার দিনের পর দিন কমে যাচ্ছে, গত ৪৫ বছরে সব থেকে কম চাকরির সুযোগ এই ভারতবর্ষে, মোদির আমলে আনএমপ্লয়মেন্ট রেট ভয়ঙ্করভাবে বাড়ছে, ভারতবর্ষের নিজের সরকারের দেওয়া তথ্য অনুযায়ী স্যালারিড ক্লাস অর্থাৎ চাকরিপ্রাপ্ত মানুষের সংখ্যা দিনের পর দিন কমছে, তখন রিজার্ভেশনের পরিমাণ বাড়িয়ে তাদেরকে সরকারিভাবে কোথায় কাজের ব্যবস্থা হবে? তাই আমি বিরোধিতা করছি না, সুপ্রিম কোর্টের রায় সকলের জন্য প্রযোজ্য, কিন্তু বিষয়গুলো তো আসবে।
So after Udit Raj called the Supreme Court casteist, the Congress party has now distanced itself from this statement and has in fact welcomed the move of the Supreme Court. Listen in.
कि कांग्रेस पार्टी की जो पॉलिसी है इसके ये आयन मुताबिक है। हम तो पहले भी इसको सपोर्ट करते थे, जब पार्लियामेंट के अंदर इसका तस्करा हुआ तब भी हमने सपोर्ट किया। तो जाहिर है कि इसके अंदर कोई मुखालफत का सवाल ही पैदा नहीं होता और कांग्रेस पार्टी इसको वेलकम करती है सुप्रीम कोर्ट के जजमेंट को। देखिए, उदित राज जी की जो राय है वो उनकी ज़ाती राय है, ये कांग्रेस पार्टी की राय बिल्कुल नहीं है। उनकी अपनी राय का भी उनको एहतियात से इजहार करना चाहिए। सुप्रीम कोर्ट के ताल्लुक से हम जब भी बात करते हैं तो इसका एक दायरा है और उस दायरे से बाहर जाना हमें ठीक नहीं लगता।
All right, more political reactions now coming in. The RJD now demanding the centre to start a caste census so that the implementation of the reservation can be done. This after the Supreme Court upheld quota for the economically weaker sections. Listen in.
I'll tell you very frankly, this is a majority verdict but with a split angle, 3:2. I think the government of the day at the centre should go for immediate caste-based census, and after that census data is available, I think reservation or representation should be according to the share in the population.
Legal editor Harish Nair joins us live on the broadcast with the details. Harish, this is a landmark verdict, one that has a lot of political significance, which is why we are seeing a host of political reactions also come in, because it can have a significant impact across the country. In a split verdict where majority agreed to uphold the quota for the economically weaker sections, what are the key takeaways from what the Supreme Court decided today?
Yes, that's right, Pratibha, as you rightly put, a big vindication for the Modi government the 10% EWS quota has finally got the stamp of approval from the Supreme Court, a big victory for the government. The biggest takeaway is that the Supreme Court has in fact recognized that economic backwardness is also a very important yardstick for granting reservation, and very significantly has said termed the EWS quota as an affirmative step taken by the Parliament for the benefit of the poor among the general category, and Supreme Court has very emphatically declared that it does not breach the 50% ceiling enshrined in the Indira Sawhney judgment, that is the Mandal Commission judgment of 1992, because this was the main plank on which these 40 petitions had been filed in the Supreme Court. In fact, it had called that, it has said that this violates the basic structure of the Constitution, but Supreme Court majority 3 judges have in fact turned down all the arguments of the petitioners, while 2 judges, that is including Chief Justice U. Lalit and Ravindra Bhatt, however, were of the view that omitting the poor among the OBC, SC, ST is violative of the Constitution and is discriminatory, because majority of the OBC, SC, ST belong to the poor community. So there is a split, but overall...
All right, hold on, Harish. We have some reactions coming in. In fact, an official statement also coming in from the Congress party. Remember, the Congress had not opposed this. Several petitions had been filed from some of the political parties, including the DMK. Now, the Congress party welcoming it, asking the BJP to clarify on the caste census now. So, politics now playing out with the political parties asking the BJP to conduct a caste census across the country. The Congress party welcoming it. So, the official statement coming in from the Congress party with Jairam Ramesh tweeting, welcoming the Supreme Court verdict, saying the economically weaker section should get reservation, and it is welcomed by the Congress party. Although the Congress leader Udit Raj had earlier today said that the Supreme Court was casteist in giving this statement, in this judgment. Now we have political reactions coming in from various quarters. The BJP, of course, has welcomed it and also called it a vindication of its stand, saying that the Modi government wanted to reach out to the people across the country, the weaker sections that deserve to get a reservation, and that has now been upheld by the Supreme Court. A batch of petitions had been filed after a marathon hearing. The Supreme Court today delivering its verdict, a landmark verdict where the Supreme Court upheld reservation for the economically weaker sections. So this could have far-reaching consequences. Remember, this is going to affect people across the country. So this including the fact that caste is not going to be one of the factors in reservation, and this is not just in the government jobs but also in the private sector. So this was also one of the crucial decisions that had been taken by the Supreme Court in deciding on the petitions. So politics now playing out over it with several reactions coming in. The Congress party also welcoming the Supreme Court verdict on reservation for the economically weaker sections. And this comes at a time when the Congress leaders have not condemned the statement that has come in from the Congress leader Udit Raj, known for his controversial statements, where he called the Supreme Court casteist. So this is an alternative to the caste quota, which is going to impact people across the country, is also going to be politically significant. Mr. Gaurav Bhatia is joining us over the phone line. Now, Mr. Bhatia, thank you for joining us. The BJP, of course, has welcomed it and also called it a vindication from the Supreme Court. From the Congress party also welcoming it, saying this is the official stand of the Congress party as well.
If this is the official stand of the party, then Mr. Mallikarjun Kharge should answer regarding the contemptuous remarks that have been made by Dr. Udit Raj. Have they condemned the remarks made by Dr. Udit Raj? Have they expelled him from the party? And second, the mindset and the ideology of the Congress party is divisive and anti-poor, anti-Dalit, anti-ST, and thus they cannot even respect the verdict of the Honorable Supreme Court.
Right. In fact, Mr. Bhatia, it's not just the Congress party, but it's also its ally in Tamil Nadu, the DMK. That was one of the petitioners in the case as well. And the argument that had been made by the DMK was to give reservation to the economically weaker sections would be a mockery of justice.
He is above the constitution of the country, and when the Honorable Supreme Court gives a verdict, you cannot make contemptuous remarks. And this kind of mindset and ideology emanates from the fact that they want that the poor in the country should not be empowered, which is the vision of Shri Narendra Modi ji. They should remain oppressed so that they can be used as a vote bank for the Congress party and the other opposition parties.
Okay, all right. And also, lastly, how do you view the verdict of the Supreme Court? Yes, the court upheld it, but there were also two justices who were opposed to it.
Ultimately, it is the majority view that becomes the law of the land, and we must also see the vibrancy of our democracy.
All right, Mr. Bhatia, thank you for joining us. My sincere apologies. We have to shift our focus now.